Hi friends, my name is Millie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be bringing you some spooky season book recommendations. So spooky season is one of my favourite times of year and I feel like it's definitely arrived in the UK. I'm looking out my window, it's windy, the sky's grey, the leaves on the tree is already turning. So I thought, what better time than to bring you some recommendations for reading for the upcoming spooky season. I know it's only September, but September kind of counts as spooky season anyway because all of the autumnal stuff is in the shops. So I've got my ghosty blanket here, I've got a pumpkin, I've got some more pumpkins behind me, and I also have my pumpkin mug. Let's get into the spooky book recommendations. So I've got a few different categories here and these are all books that I've read. So these are ones that I think you should read this spooky season if you haven't read them already. And then my sort of TBR for spooky season is gonna come obviously sort of more towards the end of September of ones that I haven't read. And there's loads of really good books coming out in the next couple of months that I really want to read in spooky season. So I'm hoping to be able to maybe get in another 24-hour reading challenge and knock through like a bunch of mysteries, bunch of sort of horror, all of those kinds of ones, because I just love the vibes, like the autumnal spooky vibes. I'm all here for. So let's bring you some recommendations for your spooky season reading. Okay, so the first kind of category that I've got is spooky forest vibes. So I'm not sure necessarily whether all of the books in this category, there's like 4 books in this category that I've got to recommend you, whether they are all necessarily set in the forest, but there's a forest involved in them. And of course the first one that I'm going to recommend is one of my favourite books that I've read, and that is My Throat an Open Grave by Tori Bovolino. So this is a very short book. It's only 250-ish pages, not even that, but it packs a punch. I completely fell in love with reading this. I feel like it is so underrated. I can't believe more people aren't reading it. I can't believe more people haven't jumped on it. It's so underrated and it is absolutely perfect for spooky season. So you're in this little town and it's a very Christian town. They're very religious and you're following a young girl called Leah who doesn't believe in the myth of the town, which is that there is this kind of lord of the wood who steals babies and leaves twigs or whatever in their place. And it's been going on for years and they always send someone after the baby but they never return. One day Leah's baby brother is taken by the Lord of the Wood and Leah is sent to retrieve him because she was looking after him when he disappeared, so everyone blames her for his disappearance, saying that she was like unworthy or whatever because, you know, they're very religious. And she crosses into the forest to find her little brother and she does meet the Lord of the Wood, but he's completely not what she expects. And it was just fantastic. Like the vibes are top tier. It's incredibly romantic, which I really wasn't expecting. If you're looking for something that is maybe not necessarily that scary for spooky season, there are definitely more scary moments in this, but it's also incredibly romantic. It's a very strange mixture, but it really, really works. It's pretty creepy and twisted, and you do have a lot of unpacking of religious trauma in here, so do bear that in mind. There's also, I can't really say what else to bear in mind because it spoils a big plot twist in here, but there is a big plot twist which I really wasn't expecting but really gave me like shivers all over, and that was a lot of this book. I had like chills all over my body and I just loved it. It was just incredible, very atmospheric, very spooky. My Throat an Open Grave. Please read it. If you're going to read one book recommendation off of this list, make it this one. And in the same vein is, I don't own this physically, but I really, really need to get a copy. It is Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew. And this really gave me similar vibes to My Throat an Open Grave, even though it's really not very similar at all. So you're following Wyatt, who is going back to her family's farm for the first time in years, and her plan is to burn it to the ground. So she's taking one last tour around the farm before she burns it. All of her family is gone. And then in the basement, she discovers her childhood best friend Peter strung up in chains, and he's alive. How is he alive though? Because no one's been on the farm in years. And what she uncovers is that Peter is actually, I don't know if he's technically immortal, but he's this being who her family have been sacrificing again and again and again for like generations, and the only way to break the curse is for him to kill the last living member of the family, which would be Wyatt. But at the same time, the farm is like on the mouth to hell, so there's all of these weird things encroaching upon the farm. There's like these shadows creeping in, and Wyatt needs Peter's help to unlock her magic in order to be able to close this mouth to hell. This just hit the spot for me. This was exactly what I wanted to read at the time I was reading it, and to be honest with you, it took me a little while to get into it. For the first 50 pages I wasn't really sold at all, but from then I was sold. I was completely hooked. I read 100 pages in an hour on the train, and I was just sat there with like full body chills. It was just very intense reading experience. So you've got like supernatural elements, horror, a little bit of romance, and there were these things that were being revealed that were the things that were giving me full body chills, and I was so hooked. Incredibly atmospheric, spooky forest, kind of maybe some sort of ghost aspect going on, and the characters and the setting felt incredibly real. It feels like you could just very easily stumble upon this farm, upon Wyatt and Peter, and they would actually be real people living there. And I feel like the author's first book, I've heard some people saying that it does connect, like the characters from the first book pop up in this one, but you can absolutely read this without having read the first book, because I haven't read the author's first book, but now I really need to. I think that is The Whispering Dark, and I just need to devour everything this author writes because it was absolutely fantastic. So well written. Would really highly recommend. The next spooky forest vibes book that I've got is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This is more set in like a sentient house, but there is a forest surrounding it, so kind of fits into this category. So this is an adult fantasy book, and you have this town that is kind of falling apart, and there is this house in the middle of the forest in this town that has been there for generations. No one knows when it was built, but our main character has been obsessed with this house her whole life. She really feels drawn to it, and one day she ends up going there to like work to clean it or something, and the guy who's living there, he doesn't really want her there, but it's just really lovely. It's a very atmospheric book. The author writes so beautifully, and it creates a really haunting atmospheric moment in this book. It's just very like elegant, I feel like is the word, is the author's writing. I really love immersing myself in how this author weaves her words. There's kind of a violence and a horror that underlie this story, but at the same time she manages to make it feel really cozy, which is strange. And I love the characters. I wanted to protect them both. Opal is our main character. She's very flawed, but I really liked her at the same time. And Arthur, the guy who lives in the house, I just wanted to protect him. Although I really loved the last 2/3 of this book, I do have to admit that I really struggled to get into it for the first like third of a book, so do bear that in mind, but absolutely worth reading. Really enjoyed it. And then the last book for this category is Together We Rot by Skylar Arndt, and this follows two young teenagers. One of them, her mother is missing, and the police have closed the case, but she will not stop looking for her mum. The other one is part of this like cult family, and they used to be friends as kids, but now they're not. But they decide to form an alliance. So the girl, main character, I can't remember what their names are, she will hide him from his family if he will help her find the evidence that his family killed her mother. So there's that going on. But there's also like satanic rituals. There's something inhuman stalking this town in this forest. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I was very pleasantly surprised. There's sort of paranormal horror aspects that meet with sensitive subjects of grief and abuse, and I feel like it made for a really interesting mix. It's definitely a weird book. There's a lot of weird things that happen. There's like elements of magical realism kind of going on. The author has a really poetic way with words that makes it work, and the weirdness just like adds to the atmosphere. I do wish this book had been longer. It was less than 300 pages, and I feel like it did need to be longer to properly immerse yourself in what was going on, to properly understand what was going on. I feel like at the end everything was very fast paced and it almost felt like I'd missed a chapter, but really enjoyed it. Want to see what comes next from this author, hopefully something similar, because I love these kind of spooky forest vibes that we've got going on with these books. So yeah, would recommend. The next category that we've got is like dark academia, gothic, maybe with vampires. So I didn't really know where to put these books, which is why they're in this kind of mixture of a category. The first one that we have got is The Scarlet Veil by Shelby Mahurin. This is actually a spin-off set in the world of Serpent and Dove, which was a very popular YA trilogy when it came out. This is more almost new adult. It's technically YA, but I feel like it is more new adult. This is set in that world, but there's vampires involved now. So that one was witches, but this one's vampires, and I loved it. So you have got one of the characters from the trilogy, and in that trilogy she became like a huntswoman, and she's engaged to the captain of the hunters and whatever. And the tension, the chemistry, the slow burn, it's very angsty. The ending shook me. Like, I need to read the sequel straight away. They've just revealed the cover for the sequel and I'm very, very excited. This is also actually the ARC edition, so I was really lucky to have been sent this by the publisher, which means that I've had to deal with knowing what happens at the end of this book, well, not knowing what happens after the end, for even longer than if I'd read it like when it was released. So I'm like desperate for the sequel. There's like a murder mystery plotline going on in this as well. I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't remember a whole lot, but I know I loved it. Celie, our main character, is an incredible heroine. She's underestimated, she's overlooked, she's kind of thought as someone who needs somebody, but she really proves herself to be independent and to stand on her own 2 feet and to be able to look after herself. And she's really determined and kind and knows what she wants out of life, which I feel like is really impressive for a character after what she went through in the first trilogy. So while this is a spin-off, I do think that you do need to read Serpent and Dove before going into this, just to know what she's been through, because it does play a big role in here. But yeah, there's vampires, and I really like the vampires in here. I feel like it made for a much more interesting aspect to the world after Gods and Monsters, which was the last book of that trilogy, which I didn't really love, but I love this. So yeah, if you're looking for like YA vampires with a bit of a slow burn romance going on. Speaking of vampires, we have An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. So S.T. Gibson is the author of Dowry of Blood, which is a Dracula retelling. Loved it. Absolutely would recommend that. That is absolutely fantastic. This one I feel like didn't get as much hype necessarily as A Dowry of Blood did, but this is more dark academia vampires. So I read this earlier this year, and while it's definitely not my favourite S.T. Gibson, A Dowry of Blood absolutely holds that title. I still think this is really worth reading. It's atmospheric. You're set at this really isolated school in Massachusetts, I think, in 1970s, 1980s, and it's sapphic. You're following, what's her name? Laura? Yeah, you're following Laura, who enters into this like really intense academic rivalry with another student, Carmilla. So it is a Carmilla retelling. Just sort of follow them as they get embroiled with one of their teachers. I think she's their poetry teacher, which, you know, with poetry going on, this is really lyrically written, and the teacher actually turns out to be a vampire, and what ensues is kind of this weird relationship between the three of them, and it's really intense, really fascinating. I do think that I didn't love the ending. It felt a bit rushed, but I really enjoyed it. Really atmospheric, again, dark academia vibes. I feel like this is a kind of more underrated dark academia. I really like the setting of this, and I just feel like it was interesting. I feel like if you like dark academia and you want to with vampires, pick this up. And then the last, this one's more gothic, it's not really dark academia or vampires, but it is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Will always recommend this, absolutely love this. I need to reread this before reading Foxglove and Wisteria because I haven't read those yet, and I really need to because I love this. This was a 5-star read for me. You're following Signa, who everyone that she's been looked after, so her parents are dead and she is always moved around amongst her family, but everyone she's looked after ends up dying. So she ends up going to like her last living relatives and they've got stuff going on as well. Their mum is dead and the daughter is really ill and the dad is kind of like gambling all his money away or something, and the brother is like trying to keep the family together, so they're like the last resort. But she sees the ghost of the mum and the mum is kind of telling her that she was murdered, so she wants to try and find out what happened to her. And at the same time, Death is a character in here. Signa has been seeing Death her whole life and she's going to try and figure out what happened by working with Death. The romance is with Death in here, I have to say, and it was just so good. The murder mystery aspect is really compelling, the vibes are there, the atmosphere is there, it's very gothic. I loved Signa as a main character, really good, really fascinating. There's a secret garden as well, and fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Then we are going into the category of murder mysteries. So the first one that we have got is a YA murder mystery, and that is Truly Devious. This is by Maureen Johnson and a really popular series. I've only read the first one, but I do really want to continue with it soon. So this is kind of dark academia almost a little bit. Again, it's set at boarding school and it's a fun time. So you have this private school that was founded early of 20th century, but the founder of the school, his wife and daughter went missing and they've never been found. It's never been discovered what happened to them, and the only clue was a mocking riddle listing methods of murder signed with the pseudonym Truly Devious. So our main character Stevie, in modern times, she's like a true crime expert and she's moved to the school because she wants to figure out what happened. She wants to be the one who finds out what happened to the wife and daughter, and then I think someone else dies and Truly Devious takes the credit once again, and it was so good. Really compelling, really fascinating mystery. I was hooked the whole time, really want to continue. For more of a cozy crime, we've got Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Sutanto. This is an adult mystery and it is really cozy. You're following this 60-year-old tea expert, Vera Wong, and I think that she runs her own tea shop, but she also likes to do detective work on the internet, which is basically seeing if her son is dating anybody because he doesn't tell her anything. Then she wakes up to find that there is a dead man in the middle of her tea shop, and so she decides to take it upon herself to figure out what happened to him. And it's really funny, it's really sweet and lovely, and just kind of goes to show that it doesn't matter what age you are, you can do whatever you set your mind to do. You can become a detective if you want to. You know, it says nobody sniffs out a wrongdoing quite like a suspicious Chinese mother with time on her hands. It is so funny. It is honestly hilarious. If you love a cozy crime, I would really recommend picking this up. I feel like it was really underrated, but I loved it. I had such a fun time with it. And then the last kind of mystery one that we've got is One Last Breath by Ginny Myers Sane. This is the very pretty ARC edition, which I was very lucky to receive. This is set in Florida, so you've got this kind of atmospheric, humid atmosphere going on. I think it was like 20 years ago, these two girls died. No one knows what happened to them, it was never figured out. And then in present day, you've got, what's her name? You've got True, who has always lived in the shadow of the murders. She always finds that these two girls who died like are always in her thoughts. She's always thinking about them. And then, what's her name? Rio comes to town and there's like an attraction between them, but they also have a connection to the murders. And it's kind of almost like the two girls who died have been reincarnated in them, and there's a lot going on. You don't really expect what happens to happen. There's a slight supernatural aspect with this reincarnation going on, which makes it really interesting. That is the fun thing about Ginny Myers Sane's books, is they're always mysteries, but there's always like a supernatural element to them, which I really love. Makes them just a bit different. And I had such a fun time with this. It was really intense. You can like feel the killer around every corner. This is definitely not one to read at night in the dark in bed, because I made that mistake and I was scared to go to sleep. Fun. It's a good Good, really good YA mystery. Would really recommend it. I've been recommending it at work, so you love it. Okay, and then in a slightly different vein, we've got cozy, spooky romances. So the first one is A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch by Sarah Hawley. This is set in the world of Glimmer Falls. This is actually the second book in the series, but this was my favourite one. The first one was A Witch's Guide to Fate Dating a Demon. This one I loved so much. It was a 5-star read for me. It's actually my first 5-star read of 2024. And in this world of Glimmer Falls, you have humans, but you also have witches. You have demons, you have sirens and werewolves and vampires and pixies and whatever, all living together. And it's a really fun world. I loved it. This is following Claudia, who's a witch, and she stops a demon attack one night, but the man that she saved is Astaroth, who is a member of the Demon High Council. So you saw him in the previous book, and he was like kind of an antagonist in that one. In this one, he's a simp. He is an absolute simp. He's suffering from amnesia. He can't remember why this demon is after him, what happened in the previous book, what he did to deserve all of this like contempt he's getting from Claudia. And she decides that she's going to help him find his memory, because once his memory is restored, then she feels like she can beat him up, basically. This is just a delightful book. It's so funny, it's so joyful, it's really charming and cute. It's just, I feel like not enough people are reading this series and loving it, and I'm really excited to read the third book that's just come out, which is A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. Really, really good. Would highly recommend the series, particularly this one. Then we've got The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston is becoming even more popular, which I love. When this first came out, I feel like not a lot of people were talking about it, which made me so sad. But this one is a romance with ghosts involved. So you've got Florence, who is a ghost writer. Her dad dies, so trigger warnings for grief in here. So she heads home, and then she sees a ghost at her front door. She's always seen ghosts her entire life. The ghost is none other than her new editor, Benji. So she's feeling very depressed. Obviously her dad has died. She feels like love is dead, and Benji is going to try and help her see if love isn't dead. Really, really cute. I feel like Ashley Poston deals with grief fantastically. It's a really big aspect in here, but I feel like she deals with it very gently, very carefully, and in a really respectful way. And at the same time, you have this lovely romance going on, and you also have this discussion around careers. Being in your 30s, not really knowing what you want to do with your life. Ashley Poston writes amazingly. Pick it up. Witchy romance? The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. I know that this was really popular when it came out, but I feel like it's kind of gone under the radar since then. So you have got Vivian and Reese, and they are both witches, and they were together 9 years ago. Vivian cast a curse on her ex with a candle. She didn't really think it was going to work, but then 9 years later, Reese has returned to the town to recharge the ley lines, but ends up that everything starts going wrong, and Vivi kind of realises that maybe the curse that she put on him actually did work. So it ends up that the curse is starting to affect the magic of the town, because he can't recharge the ley lines. So there's like angry ghosts, there is a talkative cat. It was really, really fun. I had a really good time. There's also kind of like a darker plot twist going on, which I really enjoyed. If you need a witchy romance, I would pick this one up. The Kiss Curse as well is a sequel. I enjoyed that one too. And the third book is The Wedding Wish. That's coming out soon. I don't know when, but I'm really excited to pick that one up as well. Okay, and then horror recommendations. I'm going with 2 books by the same author. Hell Followed With Us and The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. This one is post-apocalyptic horror. You're in the aftermath of kind of a world takeover by a cult, and there are these monsters running around, and your main character, Benji, he's on the run from the cult, and he is trying to run away from this bioweapon that they've infected him with. But then he gets rescued by this group of teenagers who are trying to fight back against the cult, and it was really, really, really horrific. There's a lot of body horror going on in this, and I really can't say much more without there being spoilers involved, but there's a lot of body horror going on in this, so if you're squeamish, maybe don't pick this one up. Same with this one. But Andrew Joseph White writes really, really captivatingly. I was hooked, I was in the world, I was really fascinated by what was going on, and I really think that if you love any kind of post-apocalyptic dystopian horror books, this is a really, really good one to pick up. And it's only just been published in the UK. I actually read it like 2-3 years ago on NetGalley when it was only being published in the US, and it's just been picked up by Daphne Press in the UK, and I feel like it's finally starting to get the hype it deserves. I'm just waiting for the hype for Spirit Bears Its Teeth, which is the second book. This is set in Victorian times. You have mediums who commune with the dead. Mediums are actually, they're kind of like coveted, so if you're a medium, then you are immediately kind of like sold into marriage. You have veil sickness, which is like sending mediums into madness. So the main character gets sent to this sanatorium. The students are like starting to disappear if they don't become obedient wives. So the ghosts start begging the main character for help, and he decides to expose the sanatorium to the world. Really, really atmospheric again, really horrible what happens, intense body horror once again, but really fascinating, a really interesting look into a different alternative kind of history, how that would affect modern day. I feel like is a really interesting topic to talk about after reading this book. I loved it. Okay, and then you have got graphic novels. So I love a good spooky graphic novel. Seance Tea Party by Romina Yee. This is about, it's a middle grade one, and you've got ghosts and it's all about friendship, really lovely. Beetle and the Hollow Bones, again a middle grade one, and you've got a goblin witch, which is really cute. The art style in this one I adore, like just really, really sweet. Pumpkinheads is a YA one, and it is contemporary, and you're just in this pumpkin patch. And then you have got Sheets as well, which I don't own a physical copy of, but I really want to. I've read all 3 books in that series, and that is just, you have these ghosts made of sheets, and it's so sweet. I don't really want to go into the graphic novels, just know that the art style in all of them is stunning. I really feel like graphic novels are really good for spooky season because they're always just really fun and just get you in the mood. I always love to read a graphic novel on Halloween. And the final category is witches. First of all, Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. This was a 5-star read for me. So you have Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is a secret government branch. So the coven was first founded back in the times of Anne Boleyn. It was founded by Anne Boleyn. Obviously you had the witch trials and all of that since then, but now they are part of the government. And you have this group of friends who have been friends since they were kids. Then there is this other kid who's now here who is potentially going to bring about the end of the world, and it's really all about how the friends take different stances on it. It's really fascinating to see these characters that you love kind of maybe be not very good people, not have very good morals, and it was mind-blowing. I don't want to talk about it too much because I feel like you need to go in not really knowing that much about it because it's just so good. Then you have got The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I need the next book from Sangu Mandana like straight away. It's been delayed constantly. It was originally meant to be out this September. It's now been pushed back to next April, and it just keeps being pushed back, but I need another book from this author because this was so cute and cozy. So in this world, so we're set in modern times, you have witches, but the world doesn't know witches exist. But our main character has been kind of posting these videos as a witch, and she ends up being hired as a tutor for 3 young witches and it's set in Norfolk, so really close to me, and it's a romance. It's really, really sweet. It's really cozy. It kind of gives TJ Klune vibes, if that makes sense, but witches. Just adorable. It's really about like finding family that you didn't even know you were looking for. Please pick it up. I need everyone to read this. This one, Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, I will never ever shut up about. I've read this 3-4 times. I reread it every Halloween. This is set in the Day of the Dead, so you have that kind of aspect. Our main character is trans and he is trying to prove that he can still do magic. His family doesn't believe him. He's trying to summon his cousin and he ends up accidentally summoning Julian, who doesn't even know he's dead. So they're trying to figure out what happened to Julian at the same time as trying to work out what happened to his cousin before the Day of the Dead so that he can rest in peace, he can come back and see his family and all of that. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just so good. It's a really interesting look at family. It's really sweet. It's really cute. I just love these characters with my whole heart. Cemetery Boys, one of my favourite books. And the final witchy book, the final book of this spooky season recommendation, is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. So we've got another Alex E. Harrow book on here. This is more historical. So you're set in the time of the Salem witch trials and you have three sisters who are all very, very different. And one of them is a mother, one of them is quite young, and one of them is... I can't remember what she's doing. I can't remember what the third sister is doing. But they are trying to turn the women's movement into the witches movement and, you know, trying to save their family, trying to save themselves. Really interesting. I really liked how this is a story of sisterhood. So these sisters have been estranged for a long time, but during this book they kind of come back together, and I really like this look on sisterhood that Alex E. Harrow portrays, and as well with the suffragette movement adds a different aspect to it. I really enjoyed it. This felt like reading like an old folk tale. The writing is so immersive, so haunting. The characters felt really well rounded and distinctive, all three sisters. I will say once again, like with Starling House, I struggled to get into it in the first like 100 pages, but then I was hooked, so just bear with if you're struggling to get into it. Keep pushing through. I really would recommend that you do. And now I just need to read Alex E. Harrow's debut book, which is 10,000 Doors of January. I feel like everything she writes is really different, but really cool. So those were my spooky season book recommendations. I hope that you found something that you want to read. I feel like I was kind of rushing through because I just had way too many books going on in here. But yeah, I hope that you found a book that you want to read this spooky season. Let me know if you want to read any of these. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them, and what books you think that I should read in spooky season. We love the atmospheric spooky books. So yeah, like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in another video soon. Bye!